Welcome, everyone. My name is Ingela Nilsson from Uppsala University. We're here to talk about a new book by Nikolaos Zagklas. First of all, I will remind the audience to stay muted during the entire session and to use the Q&A box for any questions. I think this is a book that many of us have been waiting for, and it's one of those books that has been frequently cited before appearing, long before appearing. Nikolaos Zagklas belongs in Vienna, in this vibrant community of Byzantinists. He finished his PhD there in 2014 and is known as an expert in Byzantine poetry, especially 12th century poetry and Theodoros Prodromos, the famous court poet par excellence. But Nikos has also co-edited several volumes and written a large number of articles over the past 8 years or so, establishing himself as an important voice in Byzantine textual studies. And this book on Theodore that he will tell us more about is very important, not only because it's one of the few studies of one Byzantine author, but above all, I think, because it offers a combination of textual criticism, translation, and analysis, the way philology should always work. Nikos is a very good philologist, trained in the Viennese tradition, but he also combines this with being grounded in literary criticism and interested in cross-cultural studies. So this has allowed him to not only offer useful additions and commentaries, but also open up for new kinds of perspectives and questions, and to question assumed boundaries like those between church and court, religious and secular, classroom and performance, and so on. But I will let Nikos describe the book and how it came about. So the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ingela, for this kind introduction. So I would like to start by showing you another book, which will help you understand how my own book came about, how it originated. So this is the so-called Basel edition. It's one of the earliest editions of Prodromos poetry. And we call it a Basel edition because it was published by a German humanist named Hieronymus Cuntius in Basel in 1536, so approximately 500 years ago. Now, many poems by Prodromos included in the book that I'm presenting today were before to be found in this 16th century edition, or scattered in some other editions from the 18th or 19th centuries. So one of the main goals of this book was to replace these outdated and completely unreliable editions. And the book ended up containing 76 texts on various themes and in a wide range of genres, including cycles of religious and secular epigrams, riddles, epophoea, and works with a self-referential and essayistic nature. Now, in order to study these 76 poems as a single corpus and signal their thematic diversity, I have opted for the subtitle Miscellaneous Poems, which is a change from my thesis, where I've used the term neglected poems. Now, you may wonder how come this corpus of 76 poems written by an author who has very often been described as the superstar author of the 12th century had attracted so little scholarly attention. There are two main reasons in my view. Firstly, unlike here I forgot just to show you the transition from the Basel edition to my book. And the first reason that nobody has really looked on these poems is that unlikely Prodromos historische Gedichte, so the so-called historical poems, edited by Wolfram Herrener in 1974, this corpus does not include any historical information. And we have to think that our field for a long time pursued the extraction of historical evidence at any cost. So these unhistorical poems, to say so, were not that important, or they were not very on the priority list. They were not on the top of it. The second reason for the lack of a systematic study of the miscellaneous poems is their manuscript tradition. 87 manuscripts dating from the 13th to the 19th centuries contain one or more poems of the present corpus. So we're talking here about a huge manuscript tradition. As a way of comparison, the historical poems are preserved only in 35 manuscripts. Now, the book has undoubtedly a strong philological focus. The second part, and I've put part of the contents here on the slide. So the second part includes the critical edition of these poems, accompanied with English translations and commentaries. Moreover, 3 chapters in the introduction explore further philological aspects of these poems. Chapter 3 discusses the meter and prosody of the poems. Chapter 4 describes the manuscripts and includes a detailed analysis of the main manuscript, Vaticanus Graecus 305, and a survey of the dissemination of the poems across the centuries. Chapter 5 presents the editorial principles. However, as you can deduce from the title, the book goes beyond traditional philology. It also aims to approach these texts from the perspective of literary interpretation, following the trajectory of some recent developments in our field. As you know, the genesis of many Byzantine texts is always intertwined with a specific occasion. In the last 10 years, we have started looking at Byzantine occasional literature more systematically, and Ingela has contributed a lot to this issue with her recent book on the occasional writings of Konstantinos Manassis, so another 12th century author. When I started working on these poems, I was a bit disappointed because most of them do not include any concrete information about the original location they were written for. In contrast with Prodromos' historical poems, which were written for various court occasions, ranging from the celebration of imperial expeditions or and victories to imperial weddings and births, for most of the miscellaneous poems, the original occasion is not clear to us, or it has been lost forever. At the beginning, I thought that this is a kind of drawback, since it won't allow me to shed light on the reasons behind the composition of these poems. But soon I came to realize that this aspect leaves much more space for literary interpretation. By scrutinizing Prodromos' different social and professional roles, the book explores the multifunctionality of many of the miscellaneous poems, arguing that many of these texts circulated in different settings at the same time. On account of Prodromos' threefold position as court poet, professional writer, and teacher, and the book places an emphasis on his function and his activity as a teacher, because that's something that has been neglected in the bibliography, in the scholarship before the publication of the book. So, on account of his threefold position, Prodromos was able to channel compositions for 3 settings: the court, the literary theatron, and the classroom. And these 3 settings can be compared to a system of communicating vessels in which fluid can move easily from one to another. whatever the primary purpose of his works, the text could thereafter be channeled to other vessels, since Prodromos moved in all these three settings. By using the model of communicating vessels, the book aims at developing a more accurate understanding of the way 12th century Byzantine textual production operated. It also aims to show that Byzantine authors are more flexible than we tend to think. Finally, a long-term goal of this book is to inspire other people, other scholars' work to pursue scholarship on Prodromos, so to pave the way for new studies, but also to draw some attention to the aesthetic qualities of Byzantine occasional poetry. And this is something that I'm currently working on together with Ingela. So we are working on a thematic cluster about occasional literature. So as most of you may know, the very term occasional has been burdened with pejorative connotations, especially after the emergence of the Romantic movement in the 18th century, which denounced any links between poetry and occasion. And I think that it will be appropriate to offer you an example of how lyrical and poetic a Byzantine occasional poem can be by reading number 62, so text number 62 from my edition, which is part of a cycle of 5 poems under the title Epikippo, to a garden. So I quote, "You see, beholder, the beauty of this garden. Look around, touch the fruits, there is no envy. Behold the lily, gather it, but with restraint. Behold the grass, enjoy it, but with moderation. Behold the water, gulp it down, but not to satiety. And behold yourself as an exact replica of me. You flourish and wither, so does the lily. You thrive and die, so does the grass. You float and recede, so do the waters. If you, man, behold the garden as I said, you will, I am sure, fill your heart with joy and earn spiritual salvation." Yeah, so that was from my part. Thank you very much for the attention.